Alright, this is just an example of something I made, and I want to show you how to generate. You'll notice that when I hit one of these rocks with my bullets, that they break up into smaller pieces. So I want to talk about how that's created, and essentially what's going on here is that when I hit one of those with a bullet or a laser, when the E-shot hits it, it gets the X and Y position of the object, feeds it to a number, and then spawns a bunch of rocks in the same place, and then destroys the original. So as an easier example of how to do that, I've made for you an exercise that you're going to follow, in which the player, when they walk over these spawners, it generates the piece. Now, the player is pretty standard. It's got a standard run and jump bundle with an animation in there, and the animation is based on flow lab pieces, so the player actually runs. There's also this just basic object that they step on. There's a NPC, and the NPC we'll talk about in a minute. Standard behaviors, you did this in the first semester. We'll review this because you probably forgot how to do it. So this is what makes a player run, the enemy run, and land on things. Let's see. We also have, here's the important part, the enemy spawner. So look at the spawner here. Open it. Here's the way this works, and there's 3 essential pieces I want to make sure that you learn how to use, because you'll use them a bunch of places in other games, in space games or platformers or whatever. So the proximity determines if the player object, or whatever you select in this list, is within the bounds of this shape. Now let me close this so I can move it over, and you can see how that works. So proximity checks to see if the player is inside that area. It's got a trigger once set to it. If you turn that off, it'll happen every time the player has triggered this object. So it is a trigger, the proximity. It's in the trigger section, and this distance determines what is the size of the area that the player can trigger in, or the shape. So you can change it to circle if you want to. So I like box because it's got a bigger chance of the player touching it. And the reason I'm using this rather than a collision is the player might jump over it. And I want to make sure that we have as many challenges as we can happening. So this almost guarantees that the player is going to trigger this to make it work. So trigger once means it's going to happen once. You can unplug that if you want to. And you could, there we go. So what this does is, once we've got the proximity trigger, it sets a timer, and the 15 is 1.5 seconds. So it starts the timer. When the timer finishes, it triggers the output to here. So we have an extractor, which gets the XY value of this object, which is the spawner, and it adds -32 to the Y, which moves it up, believe it or not, and sends this expression through. So A plus B for the Y gives us the Y value. So the X is consistent with the position, but the Y, we want to spawn the enemy creature above. So the spawner is what's here. The spawner says, let's create the thing that's listed here at the XY values that are fed into it. Now the reason I'm not hard-coding the numbers into the spawner is because I want to be able to use this anywhere I want. So any place that this might happen, it's going to spawn the enemy at that exact position. So let's take a look and see how we would go through the process of building this experiment. So here I am on my Games page, which you'll notice right now there's an ad for FlowJam 21. FlowJam is from January 16th, which is tomorrow, through January 30th. So you'll have 2 weeks to create something cool to submit. One person wins, and it's a FlowJam advertisement thing, and you can win a game device. Anyways, let's talk about making a new game. So click on New Game, and I'm going to go through the process of making the whole thing. So you can either launch off on your own if you can, or you can follow my video. So I'm going to create an empty project, click OK, open up my settings. I'm going to name this based on the assignment, which is NPC spawner. And let's make the width a little bit wider just for fun, because we can. And we're not going to build a whole bunch of climbing on this, so let's go ahead and make this a little bit shorter. Again, because we can. And let's go to game levels. Click on the color swatch for the background. And we get a nice light blue, very desaturated, less color than, more color, very unnatural, but a nice faded blue is kind of sky-like. So there we go. Let's click OK. So we're going to start off by making a ground for the player to run on. So create. We're going to name it. Always name your pieces. Floor, ground, something that makes sense is a good idea. We're going to go here and choose Browse, select Category, Pixel Blocks, and we're going to get the grass and dirt. Having done that, let's go ahead and spawn that piece, or clone it, excuse me, clone. So I'm going to run these over here, and just for fun run them over there. And I'm going to move a few of these other ways. I'm going to decide to put my spawners at these places where I've made gaps. Okay, so first we got to make a player. So we're going to choose create, name the object, always name the objects for the type, and click open, browse, select category, pixel characters, and I'm going to choose one of these characters. Anyone you want to use is fine. I tend to want to use human looking characters, but what am I? So pick animation, new. I'm going to name this run or walk or stalk or whatever. So now I'm going to add a frame, and now I've got a 3-frame animation where my little guy runs. That's cool. Okay, now we have a real simple thing to do to add movement in the behavior bundles section. This is built into FlowLab. Everybody gets this. A run and jump bundle. So if we open the bundle, it's not movable, so impulse will have no effect. We forgot to make it movable, so we're going to do that in a minute. But let's go ahead and add an animation from the properties section. So properties is properties of this object. Animation, and it's already set to run because that's the only one I have. So it's already selected that because I don't have other animations. So the keyboard left and rights are going to start the animation. When you let go, it'll stop doing that. Now the thing we forgot to do is go to physics, make it movable, and so now it's going to work. So if we run this, my character jumps and runs and skips and dances and is joyful. So we got this. Now we're going to make an enemy character. Create. I like to name my characters NPC. You can name whatever you want, but if I name all my enemies NPC 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, then they wind up showing up in the same section in the library, and this kind of keeps things in order. So let's go ahead and edit this thing and open up the sprite editor, and let's first get a character from the characters here. I have a real affinity for this red fuzzy monster guy. Reminds me of Sesame Street. Good memories there. So I'm going to open up the animation section here. Pick animation, new, run. Okay, and let's scroll back to where that was. Going to have to add a frame. Frame 2, add a frame. Frame 3, add a frame. Frame 4. Now you notice that my original guy up here had 3 frames, and these guys have 4. So it's all dependent upon what you're animating with and how you're choosing to draw it. You can have as many frames as you want to work with. So this now runs. Check it out. It looks good. I'm happy. Click OK. Now the behavior for this is pretty simple. I don't actually have a bundle built in for this, but if you make a bundle, don't forget to add your behavior bundle section so you can do it once and never have to do it again. So let's see. I'm going to use a trigger. Always got to have a trigger. My always is going to set this guy to running. So I'm going to get a number for the speed. I'm going to get the properties, and I'm going to use a velocity and an animation. So I got the velocity here, the animation there. Let's give it a speed of 3, 4, whatever you like, and get out to the forward. And then this is also going to start the animation. Okay, so we're good. The only thing I still want to do is include a trigger for collision. When he runs into anything, pretty much, he's going to turn and go back. Oops, I got another one. Delete. There we go. So let's come back to this one, and it's going to flip the properties. And there we go. Now this enemy NPC runs. And, oh, didn't fall in the hole. The reason it didn't fall in the hole is he's probably not movable. If we set him to movable, he now has gravity. So running, he runs and he falls. But because he's still moving, he doesn't really fall because he's stuck on that wall. No big deal, because we're not going to leave that open. Now here's the guts of this game, this example. So we're going to create a new thing. I'm going to call this NPC spawner. And don't even care what it looks like. Just going to delete all the colors and add this to it. What I do care about is I sometimes like to put a note on the object itself so I know what it is when I see it on the screen. So I'm going to call this N1 for NPC spawner 1. Click OK. Looks fine. So if I add this to all these gaps, That's going to work. Now, to get the guts of this going on, let's going to add the behaviors. And the behaviors are this. We're going to look for the proximity. So proximity is a trigger. It's going to look for the player here. And we're going to set the distance to, well, it helps if we can see it, doesn't it? Move that over there. So if I say, again, player, object, distance, there's the distance. You can see it's not very much. So you can actually put a number in there by typing if you want to. 60 is probably too much. 50 might be enough. And let's use a square. You can use a circle if you want to. And if I only trigger once, it's only going to happen once. So once it's done, it never happens again. If you unclick that, it'll generate all kinds of NPCs. So it's going to check to see if it's got a proximity to the player. Once we've got that happening, we're going to get a timer, which is in the trigger section, but you can use it either as an original trigger or as part of a chain of other things. So when it gets close to a player in either direction, X or Y, it starts the timer. I'm going to set this to 15, which is a second and a half. And then we're going to get extractor. Now the extractor is part of properties because it extracts an XY position is a property of the object, so it's in properties. So I'm going to go ahead and add those in there. I've got this X and this Y. Alright, so let's run this. And in an effort to keep it simple, let's see if we actually need to add in the math that changes the Y value of it. So what we're going to do now is get the components, spawn, and let's feed the XY values right here to see what that does. Just experiment with it. Okay, so the type of spawn is going to be NPC1. Let's try it. So now the player's going to run across this. It's triggering. And as you can see, it's not actually producing the player piece. So we need to do a little bit of work to make sure that that's working properly. And one thing that's missing here is, of course, the spawn needs a trigger in there. So as I out from here, I need to plug in that spawner there. Let's try it again. Go there, and it works. So what I don't like about this is spawning it in the wrong sort of direction, but that's fine. But now it works. If you want to change the direction that the object runs in when it gets there, you could, not really sure why it's reversing the direction when it starts. It's going left, that's odd. So if I wanted to chase the player, there's other things you could do, but that essentially is the deal we're looking to do to spawn the piece. You could set the direction of it when you start, but this is fine for now, and it works. So if you want to add something to this to make it run more, you can add a component for the camera to follow the player and open this up, and more right and more left. But that's all you got to do. That's the experiment for today. We're looking at how to use, again, 3 main components in here include the proximity piece, the extractor, and the spawner. And the timer is kind of a byproduct that's not too tough to figure out. There you go. I'll see you in class.